First, let me put this out there. China is not a perfect country. It has its issues, just like all countries around the world. But one thing that should be noted is that many of China's problems are unique. The way the country is run is different from most. Therefore, the methods that China uses to solve its problems are inherently also different. Today, I would like to talk about how problems are solved in China and some of my own personal experiences. Yes, I do come across challenges here in my day-to-day life. I'm a foreigner in China, and although I've been here for a decade, I still come across situations that seem to come out of nowhere, and I'm faced with trying to solve them effectively. I don't have a guidebook, though I wish I did, so sometimes I'm just basically winging it. As I've mentioned in a previous video, here in China, when you come across a problem, an issue or a difference of opinion, fighting fire with fire never works. But there is a saying in China that goes, there are always more solutions than there are problems. Last year, as I was walking home, I passed a restaurant. I noticed a new sign had been placed on the door. It read, "No foreigners." Now, obviously when I saw this, it really upset me. This would not be acceptable where I'm from, and I imagine that if the owner of that restaurant came across a sign overseas that read "No Chinese," they would be incensed too. At that moment, I was fired up. I was ready to go into that restaurant and give them a serve. But then I reminded myself that this would solve nothing. If I went in there as a foreigner, raging about the sign, it would most likely only reinforce the owner's apparent preconceived stereotypes of foreigners. So what did I do? Well, I called the local government hotline. I also decided to word my complaint carefully. Instead of shouting down the phone about how indignant I was about how offensive the sign was to me, I called up as a concerned resident of Guangzhou. I gave the address of the restaurant, explained the situation regarding the sign, its content, and how I felt that the sign would present Guangzhou, a city that prides itself on being an international city, in a bad light. The number I called, 12345, is a hotline established by Guangzhou to receive complaints. I've used it quite often, and they are required to respond. I received a text message about an hour later telling me that my complaint had been received and that someone would contact me soon with an update. So, I waited. It took 2 days for the sign to come down. I received a call from the hotline too. They told me that the restaurant had been instructed to remove the sign and that they would not be allowed to repeat the mistake, and that there would be consequences if they did. They also apologized on the restaurant's behalf. Within 24 hours of that, the restaurant also posted a public apology to its official Weibo account. I also posted my experience on social media too. I received a lot of support from my Chinese followers, who also expressed that this was unacceptable. Now I know that this is only one small instance and a small issue that I managed to effectively deal with, but I feel that this is a perfect example of how to deal with issues in this country. Society here is different. Compared to the West, there is less of an emphasis placed on the individual and more on the collective community. Here in China, if you want to solve a problem, the goal is always the same, but the method you achieve it by is different. If you have a problem that affects you, you do need to look at it from a bigger picture, and not only how it affects you personally. Only then will you come across a receptive audience. Communication is also important, and how you express yourself is critical. Anger and emotional responses aren't really looked upon positively here. Composed, thought-out complaints, though, are. I guess it stems from the fact that here in China, this is such a massive country. It is almost impossible to solve all of the individual problems that every individual Chinese person faces because, at the moment, the focus here is on improving the country overall. Therefore, if you do come across a problem, you need to think about how solving it would benefit not just yourself, but also others. I guess this story's moral is that even though this is only a very small, isolated example, Issues in China can be solved through communication, negotiation, and the right approach. Once again, as the saying I mentioned earlier goes, in China, there are always more solutions than there are problems. So, thanks again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like and subscribe.